Alright, so this is a suggestion via Discord. The name of the video is, why did the 90s look like that? Look like what, bro? Alright, coming from the channel Extra Mint. Guys, really quickly, I love the 90s. I want to go back to the 90s, alright? Kids played outside, right? Bicycles, mongoose bikes, BMX bikes that were super cool, right? But alright, let's get it. I just want to go back outside again and play like a child. But alright, let's get it.
Pokemon, The Matrix, Nintendo Dial-Up Internet, Pokemon, The Matrix, Nintendo 64, and the Fiat Multiplier. The 90s had a very distinct look, being a time for innovation and unapologetic experimentation. Spurred on by the internet and the very idea of the future, it gave rise to many interesting designs and aesthetics. So whether you grew up in the 90s, saw ads like these, or even just have this video imprinted in your brain, you'll likely recognize a lot of the styles today, but maybe not some of the weirder ones.
Okay, show me. I remember all this, I remember a lot of
It's hard not to mention Pokemon in a video about the 90s. Towards the end of the decade, the world was plunged into a multiple year-long stint of what was dubbed Pokemania. With Red and Green released for Game Boy in 1996, it marked the beginning of one of the most dominant gaming franchises to date. But it wasn't the only iconic series to be born. Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, Diablo, and Fallout popped out as well, with titles from the late 80s like Zelda and Final Fantasy beginning to gain major traction. I could go on for ages about the unique visuals of these games, from the creative menus to the character designs, but I'm not going to. Instead, I want to focus on something equally as interesting, yet far more controversial.
Okay.
Before the age of mismanaged social media accounts, one of the best ways for a gaming company to get your attention was through print ads. Recently, you might have seen images like these circulating online, showing parts of the PlayStation 2's campaign. You would have found these in comic books, magazines, and posters, highlighting upcoming games and consoles. Having limited space on a page, some of these would get pretty weird in their attempts to grab your attention. You need not look any further than this 2-pager for the Game Boy Pocket. Instead of simply showing the 6 different colours, they chose to feature tongues of varying length and colour protruding from a giant wall of flesh. I don't know much about the reasoning behind this, but I do know that I don't like how long the yellow one is. Equally as disturbing is this ad for the Eagle Max joystick. Two things stand out to me here: the fact that Drop the Load is in bold, and the fact that some of it is in his mouth.
Guys.
As for the device itself, it looks questionably multifunctional, so we'll leave that there. Okay. I found another one for the Pentium 3, which shows a newborn holding a controller with the caption, "Congratulations, he's a gamer," a phrase that hasn't been said before or ever since. With a lot of these, I noticed an obsession with making people's heads larger and centered in the page, creating a sort of fisheye effect. Outside of creative reasons, I'm assuming this was done to channel attention to a particular emotion, forming a connection with the viewer in a similar way to today's thumbnails. Anyway, as you might expect, a lot of these faced controversy and complaints. Returning to PlayStation, in 1996 they created a flyer for a music festival, printed with the words, "It's more powerful than God." This same piece was divided up into small tab-like sections.
I will go ahead and say, when the PlayStation came out, like the original one, I have no idea what year it came out, but I can only tell you when I got one, right? But when I remember playing the PlayStation, I was like, bro, these graphics are amazing. I think you had to be there to understand it, I'd say. Like, if you weren't there, then you may not fully grasp how actually amazing the original PlayStation was. Okay? And the original Xbox, like when they came out, mind-blowing compared to what was out before. Mind-blowing. When the PlayStation 2 came out, oh my God. That was crazy. That was real. But if you look at it now, it looks like just utter trash. But just understand how big of a leap, like, graphics went from pre-PlayStation and Xbox.
That conveniently
you had to be there.
Could be torn off and rolled up into filters for smoking. Other provocative entries show hands holding a PlayStation 2 controller with its 4 symbols etched into their veins. In a similar vein to this was a picture of someone's eye marked by the same. Personally, I wish we still had this kind of adventurous marketing today. While some print ads may have gone slightly overboard, it would give an edge to upcoming consoles that they haven't really seen for quite some time.
Banjo-Kazooie.
Still, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you find these effective, disturbing, or perhaps both?
I think extremely effective. I think the reason why I ended up taking the career path I did, professional photography, was kind of because of a lot of the print ads that I had remembered seeing growing up. Like, it always was something that was extremely intriguing to me, photography. And then here he goes, 2 decades later, still a professional photographer.
It goes without saying, but the internet in the 90s didn't just look different, it was different. A great example of this is Geocities. Launched in '94, Geocities was an online service that let people create, share, and browse websites, often categorized by theme.
94, I was 7 years old.
At the time, this was a major move towards democratizing the internet, as it made posting and finding others' work much more accessible. During its peak in the 90s, it was one of the most popular websites on the entire internet, being the 3rd most visited in 1999, behind AOL and Yahoo. Anyway,
now, AOL, okay, I remember getting the discs, right, going home from school, and then, you know, talking to people on AOL Messenger, bro. That was the thing. Listen, I know you remember that. If you were there, again, you had to be there to understand those discs, the free trial, and AOL Messenger. Or AIM Messenger, I think it was what it was called, guys. Or AIM, AOL Instant Messenger. Okay? That was the life in like middle school.
While making these little websites, individuals would decorate them with GIFs, banners, and messages written almost exclusively in Comic Sans. This led to some really creative and personalized pages, as users put their talents and interests on display. Now, while it was bought by Yahoo and terminated in 2009, along with millions of pages, Geocities' influence continues to this day. An example of this is the popular aesthetic known as Old Web or Webcore, which has emerged more recently. A lot of the imagery used here comes from archived Geocities websites, which might then be edited or emulated in new designs. I see a lot of this today in the advertising of smaller clothing brands on Instagram, or upcoming artists. Naturally, this look wasn't limited to these kinds of sites. Online magazines, retailers, and more would all employ the same textured backgrounds and vibrant, clashing colors of text.
I remember this. Those crazy, like background images on websites that were obvious. They were not seamless. So what's going to be the background image on this website? One image basically copied multiple times, and you can definitely tell, all right, that this is a block, this is a block, this is a block. Yeah, I don't miss that.
Now, I mentioned this iconic piracy ad at the start of the video for a reason. Although it debuted in 2004, the visual style of the text and its grimy, distorted animations can be linked to an aesthetic that was very prevalent in 90s media. Broadly, this can be labelled as corporate grunge. Inspired by the grunge music scene itself and propelled by graphic designers like David Carson, it can be identified through its use of rough textures, grainy overlays, and glitch effects. You might have seen it on this cover of Coolio's Gangsta's Paradise, or even the Half-Life game expansions. It gave companies a way to appeal to younger groups that identified with the style or found the edgier graphics intriguing and alluring. A good example of this is the packaging for Tab Extra, a drink manufactured by Coca-Cola in the late 90s. Looking at fonts in particular, one of the most common is called X-Band Rough. If you can't already tell, this was used for the piracy ad that played at the start of every movie in the 2000s. If you've ever read an I Spy book, you'd be familiar with an aesthetic from the 90s, now called Utopian Scholastic. Spreads like this could keep you entertained for hours, as you search for an array of obscure items and admired their meticulous arrangement. You might have also noticed that the series shared a visual style with a lot of other media from the time. Mostly oriented around history, science, or some form of education, Utopian Scholastic was synonymous with things like encyclopedias. The Eyewitness books are a great example.
Okay, I remember these. 100%. I don't know why I remember these, right? But I definitely know that these were everywhere, right? Like, I'm not sure if these were the people who came like to your door like a long time ago selling you books. Maybe, right? Or this is like one of these things you'd find in like the middle of a magazine and you have to mail it in and it'd give you like a free trial. Guys, everything was free trials back then, if I recall. And so I have no idea what this is and why I remember it. But I definitely remember the Ancient Egypt book and the Space Exploration book. I may have had them, to be honest. I may have had them.
Series published by Dorling Kindersley. You may be familiar with the classics like Ancient Egypt, or perhaps the thrilling pages of Bird. Its popularity was also reflected in shops and museums that adopted the aesthetic. looking at locations like this or this, you can see some similar themes.
Right.
They look professional, sophisticated, but also intriguing to the younger or more curious. The right term here is edutainment. Naturally, this wasn't only seen across physical pages. As part of the growing digital world, Microsoft Encarta would launch in '93. It was essentially an encyclopedia you could plug in and view on your computer, available via CD-ROM. Importantly, pretty much all of its iterations perfectly capture this style. My favourite
I remember this too.
example is from Encarta 95, having a start screen that features a giant head made up of sheet music and film strips. You might also spot it on CD covers like Devol's Open Book. Personally, going to school in the 2000s, I loved seeing these designs. If a book in the library had a cover like this, you knew it was going to hit.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Guys, I'm gonna be honest. I know we really don't have much need or use for encyclopedias any longer with the just World Wide Web at your fingertips, right? But I miss that time. I'm sorry, bro. I miss the time when the internet was not like the main thing in everyone's life. I miss that desperately, right? I'm sure you do too, specifically if you were there. Like, you had to be there, bro. Or I could just be looking at it as, you know, because I was there. It could just be that too, right? Who knows? Maybe the young ones may not actually enjoy things like this any longer because everything is, you know, internet based nowadays. But I missed the time when things were not internet based. Is that a Subaru? I don't even see it, but this looks like a Subaru, maybe like a 22B or something crazy. Who knows? Is that a 22B?
The WRX, R34 GTR, Super Mark IV, and the Honda NSX.
Wait a second. Hold on. That's too much. Don't do that to me again.
One thing these iconic cars have in common is their release in the 90s. And whether or not you're a fully fledged JDM fan, or just someone who appreciates what are now the classics, you've got to acknowledge a decade that brought significant advancements and memorable designs to the automotive world.
Yeah, crazy
Outside
times.
of Japan, we got things like the Dodge Viper, AU Falcon,
Ooh.
the automotive world.
Wait a second.
Outside of Japan, we got things like the Dodge Viper.
I'm going to point out that this car, I think, was on probably every young boy's wall, right? If you were in the 90s, if you were like young in the 90s, I think so, right? This absolute death machine. Never drive it. It's nice though, right? It was nice to look at. I'm not sure that I would like to look at the, you know, the deadly Miata like this, right? But I'm going to point out, no traction control, gigantic V10 engine. You just don't like yourself, right? Don't drive that monstrosity. Like, park it up, put it somewhere, right? Look at it and never drive this thing in real life. Don't do it to yourself. But it's absolutely stunning. Okay, completely stunning.
AU Falcon, the McLaren F1, and the timeless
F1?
Fiat Multipla. Still, the
What
90s
is
marked a
that?
shift to rounder designs that were far from everyone's cup of tea. Where the 80s emphasized boxy, angular, and sharp styling, the latter moved towards streamlined curves and rounded edges.
Bro, that's a nasty one. The Mitsubishi 3000 GT, the RX-7, the NSX, the Honda S2000. What is this? Why is this here? 90s? Maybe 99, maybe, potentially, right? Subaru WRX, Impreza. I have no idea what that monstrosity is, but that looks disgusting. Then, obviously, the Nissan Skyline, Mitsubishi Lancer. Guys, yeah, these were dreams. You were a 90s kid, and you were into, like, all these amazingness. You'd probably enjoy this, right? I enjoy all of these, guys. Looking at them, at least. This reminds me of my childhood, guys. But either way.
So why did they do this? And why did cars start to look like, well, that? The most obvious reason
remember
is to
that
improve
car too.
aerodynamics. By reducing the drag created by the body of the car alone, vehicles could become more fuel efficient, requiring less petrol to move the same distance. At the time, this was made easier by the increasing capabilities of computer programs. With these, cars could be designed with greater efficiency, firmly leaving behind the necessity of physical models in the drafting process. Naturally, these programs meant that the curves associated with aerodynamics could be more easily rendered and implemented in manufacturing. You can see this transition across models like the Honda Civic, going from this in the 80s to an egg with wheels.
Kicked in.
Promotional material would also take on a very unique look. Almost every car was photographed in front of a sunset or a lake, creating glowing highlights and shadows that accentuated their curves.
Right.
Over in Japan,
Yeah, we don't do that anymore. There's no need for that. We just know with enough light, you can basically make anything happen. Like, you can recreate all of that in a studio and then have a complete controlled light environment. Yeah, we don't need all of that anymore. That's all nonsense. Like, we can create all of these lines on a green screen and put this anywhere.
Or a lake, creating glowing highlights and shadows that accentuated their curves. Over in Japan, there was no shortage of interesting prints. Musins received some of the coolest, ranging from the Skylines to the 180SX.
Yeah, the cars, I miss those things, guys. Nothing is
We all know
special
about
anymore.
the Backrooms, a set of fictional locations stemming from a 4chan post in 2019. Associated images were both creepy and unnervingly nostalgic, eliciting fear and a sense of loss. As a whole, these kinds of spaces fit into the concept and aesthetic known as liminal spaces. I've included these here because more often than not, they depict architecture from the 90s, like malls or abandoned play centres. And if you were young at the time, you probably recall an era when most of them were bustling with life and activity.
Right.
I believe this is largely why they are so haunting. Seeing a bookstore or a shopping centre you once loved stripped down and in a state of decay is depressing. It suggests that people and the world have moved on, leaving these once busy places frozen in fragmented frames of time. The fact that many major department stores use similar layouts further contributes to the sense of vague familiarity. For example, even if you never went to this specific store yourself, you likely had a very similar one nearby. Turning to this photo of the Backrooms, we now know that even it was just a photo of a shop from the early 2000s. Specifically, it was taken during plans for the renovation of a Hobbytown store in Wisconsin. Anyway, you might be wondering why so many malls, those that are still standing at least, ended up in this state of abandonment. What led to their decline, and why do they still look like this today?
Amazon?
What?
The internet, Amazon, and online shopping in general. That's what happened to these places.
Well, the answer is pretty simple. In the US at least, the rise of online shopping, economic pressures like the Great Recession, and broader cultural shifts forced the closure of many locations. So while the number of malls in the 90s easily fell in the thousands, today many estimate it to be in the high hundreds, on an exponential decline. Consequently, many places that were once vibrant hubs for socializing and shopping now lie in various stages of disrepair. For those that remain, there's been no real incentive to renovate or update their design, leaving many trapped in the 90s, if only in appearance. Today, there's an entire level of the Backrooms dedicated to the idea of dead malls, unsettling liminal spaces with all of their era-appropriate rooms intact, but abandoned. How often do you think about gadgets, gizmos, contraptions, or doohickeys? What about knickknacks and whiz-bangs? What if you had a device that could channel the energy of the sun directly into your testicles? What kind of creatures could you create?
What? What did you just say to me? What?
It's questions like these that led to a decade that was fascinated with gadgets. You had things like the Sony Glasstron, Tamagotchis, and portable DVD players.
Those portable DVD players came in clutch, though, because they did. I mean, now they're pretty much irrelevant because you have that all on your phone or your iPad, right? But Tamagotchis, those are fun.
You had things like the Sony Glasstron, Tamagotchis, and portable DVD players. One of the most notable actually came into existence following the movie Home Alone 2. The Talkboy was
Don't spoil me, bro. I have to watch this for the movie channel.
Set player and recorder, originally designed for use as a prop. Soon after the movie was released, it hit shelves in time for Christmas. Interestingly, it actually faced a moderate amount of backlash. While it was still in stores, some people would pre-record profanities into the device, leaving them waiting to be unleashed on the unknown buyer. To combat this, they tried changing the packaging, which ultimately wasn't that successful. Nintendo's Virtual Boy is another one of the greats. Essentially, it was a tabletop console that used stereoscopic 3D graphics to create the illusion of depth. It came with its own controller and a thin stand to rest the headpiece on. Over the course of its incredibly short lifespan, only 22 playable games were created. Nintendo ceased production in 1996 and shifted their focus to the 64, meaning it was only available for one painful.
I remember I got the Nintendo 64 for my elementary school. I think graduation. I think it was that. I graduated, and I got the N64. It was yeah, it was definitely elementary school. All right, let's continue.
Year. In explaining the cancellation, discomfort when playing and its high price were the common denominators. Wacky postmodern, or Wacky Pomo, was an aesthetic that was popular from the 90s to the early 2000s. Common elements included slime, spirals, cartoons, and a bunch of other whimsical merriments.
You have a name for this?
This was primarily used in marketing and TV, and was quite clearly aimed at children. Good examples are Twisted, the game show, a game from '93, some of the scenes in Spy Kids, and an indefinite number of printheads. Naturally,
Wacky
this style
Pomo
also snuck its way into architecture. Sweet shops, for instance, would make good use of its eccentric patterns and shapes. Katie Mills, a shopping mall in Texas, offers a good illustration of this, with its more abstract and unconventional decor. Even the hanging signs featured red and yellow polka dots. For better or worse, this style has pretty much disappeared today. Towards the end of the 90s and the transition into the 2000s, we saw a lot of these aesthetics grow, adapt, or be left behind altogether. The use of these visuals in educational settings, for instance, would be superseded by things like Fruitiger Aero, and many of the grungy or more experimental styles were ultimately replaced by the sanitized, corporate-driven aesthetics of today. Anyway, if there's one thing I can say, it's thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed the video, and more importantly, let me know what you think about these styles below. Would you bring ads like these back, or do they belong in the past?
Nah, bring them back. Yeah, bring them back, bro. Bring them back immediately. All right. Guys, well done. Yeah, I missed the 90s. Like, I think you had to be semi-young in the 90s to kind of enjoy the 90s, but I guess the same thing could be said for if you were semi-young in the 80s, you'd probably also miss the 80s, right? So I think that's kind of what that is. Like, whatever year you were born in, plus a couple of years to where you actually recognize the world for kind of what it is, I think that's what you'll probably end up feeling nostalgic about whenever something is kind of brought up again eventually. That's probably how that works, right? But yeah, I miss the 90s. I miss the 90s a whole lot, and the early 2000s. But I miss the 90s more, right? Definitely. I spent my 90s in New York, right? And I definitely miss every aspect of 90s New York, bro. Sorry, that's just the era. But that could also be why I like the 90s so much. Like, if you spent your time in like 90s, I don't know, rural town in Alaska, that may not be the 90s may have not been like your thing, potentially, right? But just understand, I had the 90s in New York. FAO Schwartz, bro. Nathan's hot dogs. Like, the life, okay? But either way, listen, guys, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. What is your favorite thing about the 90s? Let me know. Like, if you were young in the 90s, tell me what your favorite thing about the 90s were. Because I'm telling you, I'll trade it. I'll trade all of, how about this? I'll trade you the state of New Jersey and all Gen Zers. I'll trade you those two things to put me back in the 90s. You can have them permanently. But all right, listen, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Enjoy your day thoroughly. Guys, before we go, are you guys subscribed to the other channels? Logical Movie Reviews with Mr. L. Boyd, along with Mr. L. Boyd Music. Both are found in the description. Check it out.